Great. All right. Well, thank you for the warm welcome. I am super excited to be here, partly because I love digital stories, and I think stories are just a very important thing that we can learn from, but also because I've always secretly wanted to be a talk show host. And this is probably as close as I'll get. I'm hoping that I can this can also be really fun for all of us to talk about the stories that we have. And so, like they mentioned, my name is Mike Lang, and I'm a cancer survivor myself. And actually, for a long time, for the past 10 years, have been running sort of retreats and adventure trips with young adults who get cancer, so people in their 20s and 30s. And I think some of you, I may have connected with you in some way over the years to do that. But this last weekend was great because I got to hang out with an entirely different demographic of people, and got to share stories with them as well. And so it was actually it's sort of intense. When we were talking about this at the table earlier, they were like, if we would have known what it was like to make a movie in 2 days, I don't know if I would have signed up. And I'm like, oh no. And I asked them, would you do it again? They're like, oh yeah, I would definitely do it again. So I'm glad that you guys were all here and were able to spend the time and have the effort to do that. Because I think one of the things that I've noticed over the years of being involved in healthcare, and then I'm actually doing my PhD in the faculty of nursing, even though I'm not a nurse. So I hang out with nurses all the time. They're some of my favorite people, and they have a lot of. I learn a lot about what it's like to work in the healthcare system through those classes and things like that. And I sort of understand. I think you all understand how busy and stressful it can be. And in that situation, it's hard to stop and sort of reflect on maybe some of the deeper reasons why we're involved in the things that we are, and why this conference even matters, right? Why does it matter? Why do all these things that we're learning matter? And really, I think one of the best ways to remember that is by listening to the stories of the patients and families that we treat. And that's what tonight's all about. We're just going to listen to some stories. And we know that, 4 of the 5 are from the island here. And so they're very sort of different types of stories that you may get. It's not going to be representative of all the different types of stories across the country. And I think sometimes we get really tied into generalizability and reliability and things like that. But there's still so much we can learn from a single person's story if we're looking for it. I always like to start with my favorite quote ever by this Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen. Facts bring us to knowledge, but stories lead to wisdom. And I think we do facts and knowledge really well, but one of the things maybe we don't do as well in the healthcare system is the stories, and in gleaning the wisdom that we can apply to our own lives and our own practice from the stories that we hear. So hopefully that's what you guys will leave with tonight with is a bit of wisdom, a bit of understanding, a bit of something that will help remind you why all these next 4 days or 3 days that you guys are here will really matter. All the things you will be learning matter. So so we're going to go ahead and get right into the stories. Here we go. Let's see who's up first. I don't really know. Audrey. So this is Audrey right here. She's from the island. She's up. Yes. Let's give her a round of applause. Awesome. So, as you guys are watching the stories, think about something that resonates with you. What stands out to you? Something that you sort of connected with you. And then afterwards, we'll have a chance for you to talk to the person next to you about those things. So think about that as you watch the story, and then we'll get to hear a bit from Audrey as well. So here we go. The first story of the night, Audrey's story.
After being a hairstylist for 22 years and a certified personal trainer for 8 years, I decided to return to school to embark on a career in nursing. Upon receiving my nursing degree and passing the RN exam, I began work on a medical unit. My plan was to complete the 2-year requirement for acute care experience and then apply to become a nurse practitioner. Life was full of promise, and then it wasn't. It's aggressive. It's probably already metastasized. I think my surgeon was as shocked as I was when he read the report to me. All of the 7 lymph nodes removed tested positive for cancer. I knew in that moment that my life would change. The next 2 years were a whirlwind of chemotherapy, radiation treatment, doctor appointments, diagnostic tests, blood work, and rehab appointments. Life was an emotional roller coaster, and I was surprised that after finishing active cancer treatment, I had mixed feelings. Relief and gratitude the treatment was over was mixed with feelings of fear and uncertainty about my future. My treatments and trips to the cancer center had been my security blanket, and I felt comfort in the fact that I was actually fighting this battle. With treatment finished, I needed something to help take my focus off the negative thoughts that occupied my mind since the diagnosis. I became a volunteer with the Canadian Cancer Society as a hairpiece stylist for women experiencing hair loss during treatment. The hair pieces are provided free of charge, and my experience as a stylist enables me to fit and tweak each one to better suit the person. I hadn't been volunteering as a stylist for long when I was out at a function one evening and spotted a lady who I had recently fitted with a hairpiece. She looked radiant as she socialized and danced the night away. Only the people who knew her story would know she had a hairpiece on. We made eye contact and both smiled. Her secret was safe with me. As a cancer patient, I was continually encouraged to maintain a positive attitude. As any cancer patient will probably tell you, this can seem impossible at times. Following my experience, I now describe myself as realistically optimistic. While it was never my choice to have cancer, it is my choice to move forward with gratitude and purpose. Undeniably, some days this is a struggle, but with faith in a higher power, along with support from family and friends, I manage.
There you go. Audrey's story. Yeah. Well done, Audrey. Yes. She made that in 2 days. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. I think, one of the things that really resonated for me in Audrey's story was just that little little thing in there, that story about the woman that she spotted at the concert hall. And I love that because it sort of taught me that it's not just a wig, right? It's being able to walk into a room of people and be yourself in the middle of going through something as difficult as cancer. And it sort of was a new understanding for me, I always thought it was for aesthetic reasons, but it's the ability to sort of be yourself in a group of people. So thanks for sharing that story and helping me sort of understand that, because I don't think I would have if I hadn't heard it. So that's something I sort of resonated with in the story. I'll give you guys just a couple minutes. I want you to turn to the person on your right and just say one thing that stood out to you in the story. Ready, set, go. Come on back, everybody. Come on back. Awesome. Thanks so much for talking with the person next to you. I don't know if you know the person next to you. You can introduce yourself. It's a great way to get to know people here at the conference, too. So Audrey, a couple questions for you. First of all, you were a hairstylist for 22 years. So sort of what happened, I guess, when you were first told that you were going to lose your hair?
Is this on? Can you hear me? I remember that moment vividly. I was in with my chemo-oncologist, and I had lovely hair extensions on, and I'm sure he thought it was my lovely hair. And he looked at me and he said, "You will be having 18 weeks of chemo, and you are going to lose your hair." And I said, "I don't care." So, yeah, they were stick-ons. They were. Yeah.
Yes, I don't care. They're not. It's not my real hair. I thought that was pretty funny. So I mean, there's so many different pieces of your story. As you're watching it now, what's something that sort of stuck out for you now as you're actually standing there sitting here watching your story up on the screen? What sort of does it take you back to?
What stuck out for me is I can't believe we did that in 2 days. And it was an amazing experience. I'd like to take a couple of minutes, not to digress, but to thank the Canadian Cancer Society PEI Division for inviting me to take part in this, and to welcome all you lovely, lovely nurses to our island that aren't from here. I see a few familiar faces from my degree program and also from the Cancer Society at the Queen Elizabeth. So thank you from all of us for the job you do. You are definitely very special people.
Yeah.
What was the question?
Yeah, what was the question? Yeah.
I call it chemo brain, but it may actually be old age. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, so I guess then, what's one thing that you were hoping for people to get out of your story?
I think that there's an aspect. People don't realize how strong they are until you're faced with something that you can't walk away from. It's there. So
reach inside, love the people around you, have faith in your healthcare team, reach out to the supports that are available. There's a lot more out there than you realize, and yeah, I guess that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, you don't know how strong you are, and this is coming from someone who was a bodybuilder. Did you guys see that photo at the beginning? Oh my gosh. So let's give one more round of applause for Audrey sharing her story with us. Awesome. Thanks, Audrey. Cool. All right, so who is next? Let's find out. It is going to be Barb. Barb's story. So Barb is she's been sort of hiding behind me here because this is a very big room, and she was very nice to come and sit up here with us because it's not her favorite thing to do. But despite the fact she doesn't like to be in front of a large crowd, she is the person who has been volunteer for 31 years, and actually got the Medal of Courage from the Canadian Cancer Society, which only one person in the country gets. Yeah. So she has been a dedicated volunteer for years, and so for 31 years. And so we get to look back on her experience as a cancer patient and a cancer survivor. Here we go.
My mind was blank. The surgeon was still speaking, but I couldn't grasp anything he was saying. I was only in his office to have some stitches removed, but he was holding up a pathology report. Breast cancer. The biopsy of the lump I had discovered a year earlier had been benign, and this surgery was just to remove scar tissue. How did this happen? I left the clinic and went to my husband's office so he could take me home. He knew something was wrong, but I told him we would talk when we got home. But when it was time to talk, I had no idea what the surgeon had told me. So we then had to call and arrange to meet with him the next day. At that meeting, we were told I needed to make the decision of whether to have a lumpectomy or mastectomy. After considering the pros and cons, I chose to have a mastectomy. It wasn't until we were driving home that the fear set in. How could we tell our children, our family, and our friends? Is it possible that I would not live long enough to see my children grow? What about the surgery, chemotherapy, and the possible side effects? The next few weeks were a blur, and the night before my admission to the hospital, I decided to watch some TV to keep my mind occupied. I flipped through channels until I saw a movie that was starting. I suddenly realized that it was about a young mother who had been diagnosed with breast cancer. As I watched her express the same emotions, agonize over the type of surgery, and the implications of undergoing chemotherapy and radiation, I felt every word. The story showed how she survived her breast cancer because of her attitude and good support system. I went to bed feeling I could defeat this demon. I did end up having chemotherapy and radiation, and fortunately for me, I did not experience any of the terrible side effects other than just losing my hair. It was hard, but not as bad as I had expected. I believe my positive experience can be attributed to the tremendous support of my husband, family, and friends, as well as the way I was treated by the oncology staff and the visits from the Reach to Recovery visitors. The staff were very professional in the administration of my care and treatment, but they also treated me like a friend, not a patient, by expressing interest in my life and my family. And hearing the stories of other cancer patients further strengthened my belief that I could get through this. Today, I'm a Reach to Recovery volunteer doing face-to-face visits and a telephone peer support volunteer. I knew I could face the challenge of cancer because of all the stories I heard of other patients, and participating in these programs enables me to provide the same hope that I was looking for.
There we go. Barb's story. Well done, Barb. Yeah. Well done, Barb. I mean, there's so much you can pull from that story, but the thing that really resonated with me the most is the importance of stories, right? And maybe that's just me as someone who really believes in the power of a story to change someone's life. But you sort of got to hear that, firsthand. She was watching the TV and a movie came on, and from that story, she felt like she could face this demon. It's really cool that for 31 years now, she's been offering her story to a lot of other cancer patients in PEI to sort of help them have that same experience of knowing that she did it, and so that maybe they can too. I think that's pretty cool. So turn to the person on your left this time and just talk about one thing that resonated with you in that story. Go for it. All right. Come on back, everybody. Come on back. Great. So we get to ask Barb a couple questions, and I mean, I feel like in 31 years, there's so many questions that you could ask. But I'll start off with an easy one. There, in your story, there's a couple shots of you and three ladies standing next to a car. Where were you in those shots, and what are those?
Those are shots. Those are shots.
Yeah, you just gotta hold it close to your face. Yeah.
They're shots of me and my sisters in Dallas, Texas, and we were at the South Fork Ranch.
See, I didn't know what that was. When she told that to me, I was like, what is South Fork? Yeah, so I'm glad that there's lots of people here who figured that one out. So Barb, I feel like there's so many stories, but could you maybe just share about one other experience over the 31 years of volunteering that you've done, and all the times that you've connected with other patients and families? Is there one other story that quickly you could share with us that really stood out to you?
Well, I think that what I experienced from visiting with ladies who have been diagnosed is the power of providing hope. They are grasping for that hope to know that they can survive and to be able to talk to somebody that has been through it and to explain to them what they can expect and to be there if they need to lean on you, because that's what we do as a Reach to Recovery volunteer.
Cool. And so what were you hoping was the one main thing that people would get out of your story?
I think I was trying to convey the importance of receiving support and encouragement from family, friends, and the professional healthcare team. That was my main message, I think.
Yeah, I loved all the photos at the end, that sort of, you sort of get to see her growing up with her family, right? Which is very cool. You got to have that experience, because of the care that you received. I think that was pretty beautiful. But there was one photo where there was a bunch of people laying next to a house and there was some guy with a guitar. What was that?
That was a family gathering in Cape Breton with my husband's family. Every summer they have a kind of a Kaylee in their backyard, and all the neighbors and friends gather there for 2 to 3 days. And
3-day party, yeah. That's right. Barb knows how to party, everybody. Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Barb. You're off the hook now. Now you get to hang out. Now you just get to hang out. Great. So yeah, I mean, there's so many things that you could talk about. I mean, when we're sitting around in the room sharing stories with each other, there's so many different things that come up, and there's so many things that I learn, and we all learn from each other through the process. And it's hard to sort of narrow down to what moments do you put into your story. It was really cool to sort of hear how Barb actually really remembered 31 years ago, remembered that drive home on the road. She remembered the movie, that she watched. And then, of course, she had all those beautiful family memories. I think it's pretty incredible to think that many years ago, you can still remember those moments. I think it speaks to how much of a life-changing moment that diagnosis experience is. It's funny because a lot of us had that long drive home metaphor that sort of came out in our stories, and that seems to be something that you can expect for patients after they receive the news. They're going to have that experience too. So it was something that was really neat that came out of all the stories. So who's next? Let's see here. We are Peter, our only man. So he got to sit in the room and he was sort of looking around every once in a while because he's a soft-spoken guy. He doesn't say a whole lot, but his story is beautiful. And I love that photo that we took of him because he didn't have any photos of himself. So we had to take one of them. So it's pretty incredible. Peter's background is actually in video editing back in the day where you had to clip the film and tape it together and everything like that. So this is a whole new world for him, and he did incredible. So here we go. Let's watch Peter's story.
I am number 6 of 7 children. I love nature and am truly an outdoors person. I moved to this beautiful island in April of 1990 and now live in Charlottetown, and this is my story. I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer in the fall of 2012. As with most people, it was a slap in the face, to say the least, that emotional feeling and fear of what was to come. But as my journey began and I started meeting the people I would be putting my trust in, I got a glimpse of who these people were, how they dedicated they were to their chosen profession. That caring that I saw, the smiles in their faces, that feeling that they were in my corner, that we were all a part of a team to fight this invader. It was about this time that I began to understand this was a huge load for me to carry, and having faith in God, I asked Him to carry this burden for me. This gave me a real sense of well-being in that I couldn't really lose, no matter which way things went. God was with me. I had 5 operations due to complications and infections and moving the stomach, etc. But today I am cancer-free, but with some complications. I am now a volunteer with the Cancer Society in peer support, which has given me the opportunity to talk with people who are newly diagnosed and going through treatments, which gives me a chance to hear their stories and a chance to share mine. This is a very rewarding position as I get back, it seems, more than I give. For me, this is truly a journey of faith. Faith in my God, faith in the doctors and nurses that worked with me, faith in my family's love, and also faith in me, that I would come through this. This journey was truly an awakening of my own inner strength and a journey of life.
Here we go. Peter's story. Yeah. I loved it. You know, there's something about the music and the voice. It just sounds like he's just, it's like a perfect narrating voice. It's like you've done that before or something, you know? But one thing that really resonated with me is just the idea of faith, right? And I think that's something that doesn't get a whole lot of airtime in sort of our secular society, right? That there's a lot of people out there with very strong faith, and that's a huge part of their cancer experience. And being able to recognize that and acknowledge that, I think, is really important. And I love that in your story, how you just acknowledged that and talked about how that was a really important part of your journey. That's one thing that stood out to me. So how about with the 3 people around you? Chat really quickly, and then we'll come back to you. Ready, set, go. Come on back. This is great. You guys are actually pretty good. Have you ever tried to facilitate a session with school teachers? Because it is just a nightmare. I've tried to do that once before, and literally I said, talk amongst yourselves for 3 minutes, and by the end of the 3 minutes, there was paper flying around the room. People were literally like falling out of their chairs and spilling water on each other. It was crazy. So it's you sort of wonder who's rubbing off on who in that situation. But so Peter, there's a lot to your story, you know, obviously that you can't get into in 3 minutes. And one of the things that you mentioned really quickly were there's lots of complications and there's some medical errors that happened. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I didn't want to include it in my story because it's something that happened, but it's not who I am. Mistakes are made, and I understand that. Like a staple went through my bowel and the side of my bowel, and it took 2 years for that to heal. And after 3 operations, then I had to go back for 2 other operations after that. And because of the layover, the bowel wouldn't function properly when they tried to reconnect me, and I now have to wear my friend. And did you, I mean, that's part of life, and you adjust to that. Mistakes do happen, and I don't want to, carry that around with me that I have a grudge, because I don't. I mean, things happen.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because it's totally changed your life, but you didn't want it to be part of your story, right? And
No.
I think that says a lot about the volunteers up here, right? They're making choices every day about what they want to bring to this world, and Peter's wanted to bring that support to others. But I think it's a really important example, I guess, of how every patient brings a history to each conversation that they have with you, right? And Peter may never really talk about the complications that have happened to him, but they have fundamentally impacted his life. And it's important to remember every patient has a story. Everyone has gone down a certain road, we don't come to those conversations as a blank slate. And I think sometimes the healthcare system treats us that way, that we're a blank slate coming to this conversation. But obviously, there's a lot of history involved in every single one of those, right? Yeah. So, what's life like for you now? Where are you now?
I have a great life. I enjoy life. I live every day to the fullest. I get to volunteer. I get to hang around with people like this and yourself, and to take part in something like this that would never, you don't think of something like this when you're, when you're laying in a hospital bed. But today my life is full, and I enjoy it, and for my family, and I'm here on the island by myself, but my family's all moved away. But I have many friends here, and it's a great spot to live, I tell you.
Yeah.
And just one thing to the nurses, that when I walked into those cancer doors that first morning, and you just don't know what you're going to face. And what I saw smiling faces. I saw people that were giggling in the corner, and I saw people standing with arms around one another, and I saw people hugging, and it was a feeling of family. It was a feeling of this is where I want to be. This is a great spot. I mean, I want to be a part of this, and they made me a part of that. They took me in and made, as a team, we worked together to fight this invader in my body, and it was just an amazing journey through that section of my life. And I have to thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not something you hear very often. Hey, I wanted to be a part of that. Did you ever feel like a patient would walk in the cancer center and say that? But I think it's sort of it speaks to what's possible, right? In the cancer, in the oncology world, it's what's possible, right? People can walk in and be, there's something different here. I want to be a part of that, even though they're in the midst of one of the most difficult things in their life, right? It's beautiful. So what's one thing you're hoping people would take away from your story?
It's just that there's so much, life is just so much bigger than ourselves, that we have to go beyond being here. Like, we have to put faith in other people. We have to put faith in ourselves that we can overcome, and we will. And this is what those nurses and doctors gave me, was that faith in myself that we can beat this. And like I say, I can't say thank you enough.
Awesome. Cool. One more round of applause for Peter. Awesome. All right. So we have two stories left, and let's see who's next. I think it's Kathy. So Kathy is our one out of province participant from Ontario, and she actually it's really cool. There's a whole lot of parallels with Kathy's story and your guys' story that you are about to find out, and I'm really excited for you to see that. So here we go, Kathy's story.
As a little girl growing up, it was my dream to be a nurse. I wanted to make people feel better, or, I think secretly, it was the lure of the starched white cap and the crisp white uniform. At 21, I attained my dream. And the first time I stepped onto the wards, I gave someone a back rub and they thanked me. It felt really good. I spent the next 16 years working in many areas of the hospital, perfecting my skills and procedures, but over time, I found myself becoming more frustrated and dissatisfied. I had stopped wearing my cap, and my white uniform had become a pair of scrubs. Patients had become just a diagnosis. You know, the gallbladder in bed 3 or the post-op in bed 2. It felt a lot different than the first time on the unit. Finally, I heard about a job in the oncology unit at my hospital, and there I found my passion. I felt needed and fulfilled. They trusted me and my skills. It was a privilege to care for someone at the most vulnerable time in their life. The staff on that unit were like family, and we shared much of our lives at the nursing station. We would chat about the daily ups and downs of work, our spouses and children, and together dream of a future of graduations and weddings and grandchildren and even travel. More than once, I told my colleagues I was living the dream. But then one day, after 17 years, I had to go to work and stand at that very nursing station and tell everyone I had been diagnosed with cancer. I had become a patient. In one fleeting moment, everything changed. My family and friends were there for me every day. The oncology staff, some of whom I had mentored, were wonderful and caring. But after each treatment, I left feeling like I was losing more and more of myself. I tried to be the best cancer patient ever, but deep down, I hated it. I was supposed to be the one helping, not the other way around. A month or so after I finished treatment, I stepped out of the shower and glanced into the mirror. Who was this pale, hairless, scarred thing staring back at me with these huge black eyes? It was then that I realized I needed help to find myself again. I needed people who understood and appreciated the daily realities and inner struggles of being a cancer patient. I decided to reach out to a peer support group, and there I met a woman who was a 30-year survivor. She had been where I was, and she understood my struggles. Throughout our conversations, I gained the hope, determination, and inspiration I needed to face each day and to move forward. Today, I am a 14-year survivor, or as I like to say, thriver. I never went back to oncology nursing, but despite the fact that I no longer deliver chemotherapy, I still help patients and their families in a very important way. I am a peer support volunteer with the Canadian Cancer Society. Cancer has become part of my identity in a different way than when I was a nurse, but it is still only a very small part of who I am.
Kathy's story. Yeah. It's a great story. I mean, there's so many things in there that resonated with me. But one of the things that really stood out to me was that whole idea of the identity that she had. And it really talks about identity as an oncology nurse, but then also as a cancer survivor and cancer patient or cancer thriver. It's I don't know, I think it sort of speaks to that fact that when someone's diagnosed with cancer, it's not just their physical health that's at stake, right? It's who they are as a person. It's their identity. It's the people they hang out with. It's their family and friends, and the relationships around them are impacted in a big way. And I love that description of standing around the nursing station, and having conversations, and how after she was diagnosed with cancer, she needed that same experience but she just had to find it in a different place. It wasn't around the nursing station anymore. It was with this peer support group that she found. Beautiful story. So maybe as a table, you guys can just turn to each other and talk about what resonated for you for a couple minutes. Ready, set, go. All right. So yeah, let's ask Kathy a couple questions. So Kathy, there's a few things in your. I mean, there's so many things I could ask you about in your story, but there's one that's really like a big moment, you know, and it's that big white alien face that just flashes on it, and it's shocking. Tell us a little bit about that photo and why you chose that.
I chose that. Hello?
Yeah.
I chose that photo because it was a cold January morning, and I was done treatment, and it was time to move on, and people were sick of my story, and the people around me were so supportive and loving. But I mean, it was done. It was time to move on, and I didn't realize. I don't know. I guess I didn't realize what I really looked like. And I did get out of the shower, and I did look in that mirror, and I couldn't believe the changes outwardly. I knew I had changed inside, but I couldn't believe the changes outside. And I remember saying to myself, "Oh my God, I look like an alien." And I sat down on the toilet and I just cried. I cried and cried and cried. And that was probably the first time in the whole thing that I ever really let myself feel what I had gone through. But it was also a turning point, because I thought, this is not going to be me. I'm going to change this. I cannot stay this way. So for me, it was a pivotal point. I'd come through chemo, I'd come through surgery, and all of that, but I was a mess. I was hairless, and you know, I had a mastectomy, and I was scarred, and it was tough. That was a tough one. And so I really did think I looked like an alien. I didn't know myself.
And I mean, it's sort of a powerful moment in the story, right? It just sort of shocks you, but it's almost like exactly what you felt in that moment when you turned to look in the mirror and you didn't recognize who was staring back at you. Yeah. What I really like about that moment is it didn't sort of end there, right? It was a catalyst for another step that you took in your, I guess, your healing process, right? Was to go and talk to someone else who had been through cancer. And so what was that, you know, it's sort of interesting. All the Canadian Cancer Society volunteers here have their own stories about how they came to volunteer. So what would you say, how did you decide from that first experience at that support group to become a peer supporter yourself?
I met this woman who was a 30-year survivor, and she was the one that said, you know, you will be okay. You're going to be okay. And after talking to her and listening to her story and seeing what she was doing for people like me, I thought, you know, I've got to give back. I've got to reach out to people. I've got to help them through this journey. And it took a while. I had to go through some more recovery. It didn't happen overnight. But once I felt well, once I felt recovered, you might say, I needed to do more. I needed to give back, and I needed to find a direction for the rest of my life. And I didn't have grandkids then, and my kids weren't married then, and I still needed to find a direction. So she really was a motivator for me.
Mm-hmm. It's cool. I mean, one of the things I love about your story is that you've experienced the delivering chemotherapy and then also having cancer and then being a peer supporter. But both of those things in your story matter, right?
Yes.
And I think it's important to recognize, you know, that the physical care matters. But there's other ways that people support too, and that peer supporters often have a lot to bring to the table, right? They have stories that can help people sort of feel like if they did it, I can do it too, right? And so, so if there's one thing that you're hoping for people to take away from your story, what would that be?
I wrote a couple things down. What can I say? The first thing is, we are as patients, we are so much more than just a diagnosis. And I think we tend to, as nurses, treat the diagnosis. I think oncology nurses have a special way in treating their patients. I see the compassion, I see the passion. In fact, I use the word passion in my story, and then I was looking at the CANO thing, and it's our patients, our passion, and I thought, oh, they're going to think I picked that up, but I actually had it in my story.
You guys got the idea from her. Yeah.
So I think that's one thing is we are much more than just the diagnosis. And the second thing is, imagine if it's you. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, we all know the stats, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this story may be a few other people's story in this room. Yeah. Great. Thanks so much, Kathy. One more round of applause for Kathy. All right. Well, there's one story left, Simone's story. And so Simone is from the island, and she also grew up, and maybe I'm getting ahead of the ball here and telling you what's in her story, but she grew up in a French-Canadian town on the island. So she'll be able to speak both in English and French when we do our little interview afterwards. So yeah, let's hear Simone's story. Here we go.
I was born the sixth of 8 children on July 30th, 1965, my mother's birthday, and raised in a small French community of Evangeline in the western part of PEI. My family doctor has been part of my life for the better part of 15 years, so I knew by the tone of her voice it was as hard for her to deliver the news as it was for us to hear. My diagnosis? Invasive breast cancer, stage 1. After a few tears were shed, I looked at her and said, "Okay, so what now?" She assured me that I would do well, as it had been detected very early. And in the same breath, she indicated that she had already been in touch with the surgeon that would be seeing me in the next evening. Before leaving, she gave me a hug and handed me the Seeds of Knowledge, a package of information about breast cancer. She reassured me that I would be okay, and because of our relationship over the years, I trusted what she said. My husband and I drove home separately in each of our vehicles. The road was the same one I had been driving for 7 years on a daily basis. But that day, it was the longest drive of my life. At home, I called my daughter, who was attending university in Saskatoon, to let her know. I told her that no matter what, I would keep her advised and not to worry. My son lived at home with us at the time, and we shared the news with him and then called other family members. Everything happened so fast. My husband and I were trying to wrap our heads around what was happening. But that very evening, we read from the book that my doctor gave us, and we felt empowered to know that we would be able to understand what was being said to us during that consultation with the surgeon. It was the one little thing we could do in the middle of a storm of emotions that we had been drawn into. The very next day, I decided to visit the local Canadian Cancer Society to see what other information was available. There's lots of information available on the internet, but I knew the trusted and reliable information I was looking for would be there. The first person I met was so welcoming, offering to listen and find out what I needed. I felt like I had left there with more knowledge of what I was dealing with. On April 5th, I underwent a lumpectomy and had 7 lymph nodes removed. The margins were clear. I'm grateful to the Charlottetown Cancer Treatment Center staff who have been part of my journey and who have shaped how I was able to live as normal as possible during that treatment. I'm now 2 years out from having cancer treatments, and I feel amazing today. All results point to being cancer-free, and I choose to live my life fully. I returned to work in January of 2017. I do volunteer work and am involved with the local Canadian Cancer Society peer support, and recently got involved with the peer support online.
Simone's story. Awesome. Awesome. I love Simone's story because me and Simone have very different personalities. And I was the person who said, I don't want to know anything, and for Simone, knowledge is power, right? And I love the title of your story, right? And what really stood out for me is that there's certain people that really matters to, right? And just because it didn't matter to me doesn't mean that still isn't really valuable and important to have available at all the cancer centers. And so, we'll give you guys just a couple minutes to talk amongst yourselves, and then we'll wrap up. Great. Let's ask Simone a couple questions. So Simone, you're sort of the newest person, as far as like distance from treatments. So what was it like for you to see your story up on the screen there and to go through this process?
Oh God, you had to say that, didn't you? For me, I was diagnosed in 2016, so I'm a 2-year survivor.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate to have my family doctor in my life and to be given the information, to be able to refer to it before meeting my surgeon. And that was important to my husband and I. Sorry. Yeah. Just to have some knowledge before we went in.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really important story to show how, how important primary care physicians are, right, in this whole process. Really, the whole cancer experience starts before people walk in the doors of the cancer center. And if we really want to improve that for patients and families, that's something we need to consider, I think. I don't know what role oncology nursing will play in that, but I think that is one thing that I really took from your story is that, the doctor was really, your family doctor was the beginning of your experience and what made it actually something that was manageable for you, right? Having those books.
It was, and I think had the news been given to me differently, and had I not been given the seeds of knowledge for my husband and I to just kind of comb over the night of having been given that diagnosis, I think our experience would have been so much more different because we felt empowered by having that bit of knowledge. And it's research information. And, I can be thankful for Jana. The very next day that I went down and, she was so welcoming. So the Canadian Cancer Society had a big part, and that's why I volunteer with the Canadian Cancer Society groups. And Barb was one of my first Reach for Recovery individuals that I met, like within 2 weeks of having had my surgery. She and another colleague of the Reach for Recovery were in my home. So I can be thankful for that as well.
Yeah. That's very cool. So one final question for you then. What are you hoping people take away from your story? In addition to, I guess, knowledge is power, information matters.
Some people need that information. I didn't go looking on the internet. There's too much information there. A lot of it is not research, it's just opinions. And if anybody can take anything out from this, it's work collaboratively with the Canadian Cancer Society. Their information is so much more valuable and information that's useful. And so if anything, that was my, like I indicated to Jana, I'm an information hoarder. So it was important for me to have that information at my fingertip as it was for my husband. So thank you.
Awesome. Great. One more round of applause for Simone. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for allowing us to be here and for coming. I know this has been a long first day for a lot of you. We don't really have time for a discussion, but I'm going to leave you with one last sort of idea or quote. There it is. I think this is something that we should be telling patients and their families. Right? Is don't underestimate the power of your story. And I would probably extend that out to you guys as well. Right? There's a lot of things that we can learn from a single person's story. And it may not be something that's generalizable to everyone. But if we look for those little nuggets of wisdom in the stories, they're there. And I know you guys have that experience every day, connecting with patients and families. And so hopefully you'll take that with you and hopefully remember these guys. As you sort of move through the rest of your conference and as you go back home to your own provinces. And remember our stories and take those with you because that would mean a lot to us. And sort of the cool thing is you actually can take these stories with you because they're going to be posted on the Canadian Cancer Society website and the CANO website. You'll be getting a link to them, and you can share any of these stories. And it's incredible these guys have offered to do this, but you can share those with your teams back home. And it's a little 3-minute story at the beginning of a meeting, followed by a 3 or 4 minute discussion. It's a small little thing, but it can totally change the feeling of a day if you could watch a story every once in a while in one of your Monday meetings or something like that. It's a great way to remember why we're all here. So thank you for being here, and pass it over the window.
Where do you start? I'm sorry we didn't have more time for discussions. I think this was just the most amazing session. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of everybody here. Your bravery, your openness, your willingness to just step into this 2-day experience and just go like, what the heck is this all about? The beauty of what you created for us and starting our conference off with your voices and your stories will stay with all of us. And we thank you.